Presented by the Common Sense Institute, welcome to Common Sense Digest, the podcast that seeks to inject a little common sense into Oregon's policy discussion. Here's your host, Earl Wright.
Welcome to the Common Sense Digest podcast. My name is Earl Wright. I'm the chairman of the board of Common Sense Institute and your host for today. In January, CSI made a bold move to kick off 2024 and launch two new states, Iowa and Oregon. I'm pleased to report that both states are already releasing new studies and engaging in the public policy arena. Along with the successful counterparts in Colorado and Arizona, as well as the recently launched Iowa office, CSI Oregon is guided by a board of local leaders, each bringing expertise from various industries. These board members share CSI's dedication to factual, non-partisan policy analysis. In effect, what we're trying to do is have free enterprise flourish and common sense be on the march in 4 states that we're now involved in. Joining me today is Mark McMullen, CSI Oregon's new Vice President of Policy and Research. It's my pleasure to say welcome to the podcast and welcome to CSI, Mark.
Thanks for having me, Earl. I'm happy to be part of the team.
Mark, you have, I consider, an exceptional background for what we're trying to accomplish. My goodness, I mean, you've been, besides a distinguished academic career, which I'll let you outline for us, you worked with the Congressional Budget Office at one time, and you've had an extensive period of time within the economics of Oregon. Give us some more background, if you would, please.
That's right. So after college, I took a research position with the CBO in Washington, D.C., and then went on to do my graduate work at the University of Pennsylvania. After that, I went into economic consulting at Moody's Analytics. I was the director of consulting there, which was also based out of Pennsylvania.
Now, wait, what does Moody Analytics do? Because I know, being in the finance world, that's a pretty, sophisticated group. But give us a little background on that, if you would, because I think everybody would appreciate that.
Yeah, as economic consultants, they have a very wide range of clients. They do macroeconomic forecasting, and they do a lot of speaking engagements and one-off consulting projects for governments, for commercial real estate firms, for financial service industries, a whole wide range of industries and manufacturers and the like.
So it's pure research. No R&D. It's just pure. What do the numbers suggest?
Correct. Very detailed, like I say, across different industries. A lot of regional work across different states and localities, and the like. A lot of the clients of Moody's Analytics very interested in how these different industries will perform, how different regions will perform as they're trying to put together their investment portfolios. And there's also policy research on the part of a lot of state and local governments who would like some support both in determining the outlook and trying to decide, in terms of policy outcomes.
Well, you also you've spent, I must compliment you, a few terms, governors. You've worked for a few governors in Oregon, which suggests you, to me anyway, that you have an ability to work with all sorts of people with different priorities. And tell us what you did, if you would, please.
Absolutely. So after moving out to Oregon, my wife became pregnant, and we set up in Oregon because my family, both sides of my family, were here. And so Moody's was nice enough to set me up here. And at that point, the chief economist of Oregon recruited me to be on his team. After he recruited me to be on his team, a couple months later, he flew the coop and resigned, leaving me holding the bag. And so since then, which in November of 2010, I've served under 4 governors, 3 as the chief economist, 1 as the acting chief economist for a couple of months or so, which was a record. No one else made it more than a decade. It's a very politically charged position, and it's an appointed position. And so it was very rewarding over time. And I learned a whole lot. But yes, I had to work with not just 4 different governors, but, every different legislative session, we have, 90 different bosses in the legislature. And so, get pulled in a lot of different directions.
Well, you've had this incredible experience in government. And how is it that we became so lucky at CSI to convince you to join us and trying to help us in the public policy arena and do the analytical work that we're doing? Help us out in that decision.
Well, I'm the lucky one to be a part of the CSI. I think it's a real exciting opportunity. And why it's so exciting to me is that I get to look into policies a little bit deeper. In the role as chief economist for the state of Oregon, the real goal is to be objective, because otherwise the system doesn't work, both in terms of our revenue forecasting efforts, which, unlike other states where you have forecasts coming out of the legislature, forecasts coming out of the executive branch, out of universities and the like, and then they bargain over what to use for the budget, we only have one. And so really, we really need to have a perception of objectivity. And so in order to do so, we have to pass off a lot of the policy analysis, and then that's done on the legislative side, whereas a lot of, in terms of the outlook and whatnot, was done by us on the executive side. And so really didn't have any freedom to look at policy. And, in Oregon, there's a lot going on, as there is in all the CSI states. And so this job really gives you freedom to take a deep dive into some of those issues and examine the facts that can lead to policy solutions. And in Oregon, we've made some policy errors, in the last decade or so. And, while I was in the chair of chief economist. And so it would be nice to try to, influence, or at least inform Oregonians of what the impacts in terms of the policy on the economy are.
Let's kind of dig into that a little bit. So, you were involved in kind of looking at the broader macro world in Oregon, and now you have a chance to dig into the specific public policy issues. And as we affectionately say at CSI, it's not R or D. It's a matter of just what do the numbers suggest and informing people. How do you see your role at CSI with regards to Oregon? Well, what you've already done so far, a little bit of that. I've already had a chance to read some of that. And maybe a couple of 3 areas that you'd like to see a deeper dive in the next few months.
Sure. Our primary policy issues right now are very similar to those that we're seeing in the other CSI states, Colorado, Arizona, and Iowa, in terms of housing, tax policy, crime and addiction, homelessness, and the like. I'm just now getting started, but we have a couple of really big policy pushes right now that have come out of the last couple of legislative sessions that are just getting unrolled. One being massive housing packages in the last 2 legislative sessions, major policy emphasis of our current governor as well. And so these are just getting rolled out, these efforts to try to stimulate housing supply across the spectrum and across the regions of the state. And so this is obviously something we need to keep an eye on. And the other one would be the recriminalization of simple possession of drugs. So in Oregon, we had a ballot measure in 2020 that decriminalized simple possession of drugs, opioids and fentanyl and the like. And this didn't work out as expected. It was trying to be based on the model in Portugal, where instead of doing penalties through the criminal justice system, we diverted everyone into treatment programs and the like. Well, we weren't really ready to go in terms of having the mental health support in place, and we didn't get the participation by the drug users that the voters expected. There was a big backlash on that, and in this last session, the legislature went ahead and passed a bill that recriminalized the simple possession and set up a more formal mental health support system. And so that's going to start up in September 1 and start rolling out. And so that's something, of course, we want to watch as well. And finally, in terms of what's coming up in the pipeline, in our next legislative session, which begins at the beginning of next year, it's going to be all about transportation. we're due for a transportation package. Our Department of Transportation is on an unsustainable financial model right now, as they depend very heavily on fuel taxes, which as vehicles become more fuel efficient and people drive less, it erodes their ability to fund the repairs and the expansions that are needed on our roads and our highway system. And so in addition to that, there are equity considerations, where in Oregon we have constitutional requirements to make it fair in terms of the amount of money that the light vehicles, the cars, are putting in through registration fees and gas taxes, and the amount of money that the heavy vehicles are putting in through weight mile taxes and the like. And right now, the state is being sued by the Trucking Association because that equity has gone out of balance in recent years. And so transportation is going to be really about all that the legislature is going to be wrestling with in this next big session, or at least it's going to be the big major policy push. And so we're going to need to try to weigh in on that.
One of the things that you'd mentioned 4 different areas, and what I found in reading the reports out of Arizona and Colorado and Iowa is that there's not only a commonality of the issue, but there's a learning that goes on by seeing what is working in one state might be useful in another state to take a look at it. And sometimes the situation is just unique to that state, be it housing. I know the housing shortage in Colorado is huge relative to the demand that is there and the housing units that are coming forward. In fact, there's not even enough housing permits. So I take it when you're going to look at that, it's not only a matter of the demand, but also what price of housing do you need to have to meet the population of Oregon so that the needs can be met? Or am I expanding that beyond what you think you'll be looking at in Oregon?
No, I think that's spot on. And when we met with our board last week, there were a couple of items of extreme interest to them. So in terms of where we are in Oregon today, we're building about 20,000 housing units a year, which is not enough to keep up with population growth, nor to fill up the deficit that we have right now. If we look at what we need right now, because of the underbuilding in the last decade or so, we have about 140,000 units that we need to catch up, and then we need to keep up with population growth going forward. And so the governor's plan is to try to reach 35,000 units. We're at 20 now. We peaked at around 30,000, 35,000 in the housing boom. So it's possible, at least for a short period of time, to get there. Now, some of that pressure has come off since the governor wrote her plan, because we've seen a slowdown in population growth here in Oregon. So a little bit of the pressure's off, but nevertheless,
you've had an in-migration issue too, haven't you?
It's more out-migration that happened during the pandemic. In terms of the in-migration, that seemed to hold up, and that speaks towards housing affordability is what most people are pointing toward, because a lot of the folks that move into Oregon come from even less affordable states, particularly California and Washington to the north, right? Okay. And where we saw the outmigration was to a lot of rural areas and less affordable states. And we saw outmigration among households with children, which suggests they needed more room and that affordability was an issue and the like. And we're still seeing in-migration of the young working age households, which are the gold standard for economic development. The 18 to 24-year-olds who are just in their root setting years, which is still terrific on the inside, but in terms of the inflows. But the outflows did certainly slow down during the pandemic, although we're seeing a little bit of that recover now.
Oregon is such an absolutely beautiful state, and I would think attractive for a lot of people to come just to the quality of living. One of the issues that we've seen in other states is public policy issues work against the creation of affordable housing. Is that an issue in Oregon and like in two of the other three states with CSIs in?
Absolutely. And now we are pouring, or Oregon policymakers have poured a tremendous amount of resources, both at the local level, and particularly in the Portland metropolitan area, as well as at the state level, into both directly subsidizing affordable housing and making it part of, in terms of the inclusionary zoning and the like, where you have to include some affordable housing when you build other housing in terms of those policies, and which helps because every unit is necessary, but that it's not a problem that could be solved just with public money because they're just too big. Plus, new construction is not affordable. It's very hard to make new construction affordable without cutting very, very many corners. And so our board has suggested we look into a couple of different avenues. One is to try to highlight the importance of filtering, and filtering being that new construction is really hard to make affordable, but if you build a lot of new construction and you have a big supply, well, then the older houses become more available and those become more affordable. When there's not this big imbalance between demand and supply, then we can start seeing some of the older units become affordable over time. And so they're very interested in looking at that filtering, and also very interested in looking at some liability reform for converting apartments into condominiums, because condominiums being smaller, sometimes they're more affordable, but that's very hard to do because a lot of the builders are at a lot of risk for being sued over time.
Fascinating. Homelessness is an issue in, again, 2 out of the 4 states in a big way. And I know you've had some issues in Portland. From everything I have read, Mark, homelessness, it's just not a matter of providing some shelter. There's a holistic issue oftentimes about the dynamics of the individual and their personal needs, as well as just the fact that they don't have shelter. Where does homelessness stand as far as the research and work that you think you'll be seeing yourself involved in the next 12 months?
Yeah, I think we're going to do a lot of that because it's a huge policy push here, and it's certainly something that concerns our urban areas greatly. Not just the big ones, metropolitan areas, but our mid-size and smaller metropolitan areas as well are struggling with this. And so we're certainly going to work on it. But you're right. It's not just about having shelter space, because it's more about a lot of the other services that you need in order to support people into permanent housing. And hopefully some of that will come along with the mental health efforts associated with our recriminalization of the simple possession of drugs. Hopefully some of that will also come, from broader efforts in terms of building shelter space and having space that is more conducive to different individuals who don't really fit into a group shelter. So we have a lot of these smaller areas where we build little one room units and have services on site. And that's really where our local governments are trying to push, but we're still early in that process, and there's still a lot of need that's not being met.
Yeah, one of the things that I know, again, referring to the 2 of the other 4 states, is the drug issue, which is it's devastating amongst the homelessness in those states that I'm referring to, which happen to be Colorado and Arizona, and the suicides related to those deaths. And I hope that you don't find the same thing in Portland, but I know that has expanded the public policy discussion. And wait a minute, how do we create a holistic approach to help these people? But I know you're going to come up with a unique study relative to Oregon as to what the issues are and what the costs are and alternatives. So good luck there, and thanks for taking that on. I want to move on to the November election if I could. I had a chance to look at the material for the CSI board meeting, and all of the basic issues that could come on the ballot My goodness, I was overwhelmed at the potential of issues. But what one or two issues do you think you're going to be taking a look at and trying to do some analysis on and inform the Oregonian public about?
Really one big elephant in the room, and it's unclear if any of the other, although there are a lot of proposals out there, it's unclear if any of the others are going to get enough signatures to get on the ballot in November. Mm-hmm. But the one big one that will is a basic income measure, which would give $750 each year to every man, woman, and child who has lived in Oregon for at least 200 days over that past year. And that would be funded by a gross receipts tax on any sales from businesses over $25 million. So our big businesses, we're talking about a couple thousand businesses there that would end up paying 3% gross receipts tax on any of their sales that are over $25 million. And then that just gets redistributed across the entire population in terms of this proposal that just came out.
What is the need that's being met? What are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah, the theory is that the basic income, if we give every individual some basic level of income, then it really does not only stimulate more spending in the economy, but also reduce the need for a lot of public services, trying to get folks that are the most vulnerable kind of over the hump, as it were. And so the proponents of the measure would push for it because they believe that that this really does, raise all boats insofar as it takes care of a lot of the need that's out there, or the most extremely needy folks. That said, of course, our business community is not very excited about an additional taxes on corporations. In particular, since we just passed a gross receipts tax in Oregon just a handful of years ago, and have an extremely complicated business tax system, both through pass-through income that goes through the personal income tax, as well as our traditional corporate income taxes. And now we've layered on corporate income taxes, corporate gross receipts taxes. And so this would be just one more tax on the pile, and very, very challenging for the accountants that work here.
I guess I'm trying to internalize the 750, and I'm not trying to pass judgment on it. I'm just trying to figure out, for an individual that might buy groceries, but I can't imagine take care of groceries for much. He certainly wouldn't for a family, and I don't know that it would. This is every Oregonian would get 750, regardless of their income level.
That's right. And so, regardless of their age, regardless of their citizenship status, across the board, anyone who had lived in Oregon for 200 days over that past year. Now, obviously, there are a lot of administrative challenges to trying to roll this out. They're asking the Department of Revenue, in terms of the ballot measure, suggests the Department of Revenue will administer this. But a lot of people don't file personal income taxes, particularly the low income folks, the people who don't owe taxes or whatnot. And so I don't think a lot of these administrative questions have been tackled yet. I guess we'll see if the voters approve it first.
I'm puzzled as to why somebody that has 6-figure income or high 5-figure income needs $750. And I'm not trying to have you justify the legislation, but if you have a comment as to what the reasoning is behind that, I think the podcast listeners would appreciate it.
Okay, this is my own opinion, but my guess is that the authors of the ballot measure, who the sponsors of it are from California, not from Oregon, but I think the sponsors of the ballot measure think that makes it more likely to pass. If everyone gets their $750, maybe more people will be inclined to vote for it.
Okay, I have experience personally outside monies coming into a state for a ballot initiative, and so I guess Oregon is subject to that at the present time. Give us some insights, if you would, as to you've got a forthcoming study on this, right? So you're going to take a look at it, and you're going to see what that economic benefit or disbenefit of this $750 for everybody will be before the election. Do that analysis before the election.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, the Legislative Revenue Office is busily putting together numbers, scoring for this. And their hard deadline would be July 18th for what we call a price tag committee before it gets on the ballot. And so we're eagerly awaiting what those numbers are. We know they're going to be very, very large in terms of the revenue generation there. And then we can take those numbers and run with them and look at them across different regions of the state, different income levels, and try to see what that would mean for economic activity. Try to feed that through and see what that would do to Oregon's economic activity. But still breathlessly awaiting the revenue estimates.
Any other initiatives that just kind of capture your attention at the present time that we may be involved in assessing?
It doesn't look like this round. It looks like this round, that's the only one that's going to actually get enough signatures to get on the ballot. But there are a whole host of policy arenas that still need to be looked into. In particular, there's a lot of debate about economic incentives. Right now, we are seeing a tremendous amount of investment in our microchip and our technology industry. And a lot of that's come through the federal CHIPS Act. And so there's a lot of debate as we include a lot of state funds and to try to influence or encourage business activity and investment. Right now, I think we're going to have to dig into that a little bit as well. And our board also is very interested in regulation. They're interested in cap and trade. They're interested in also a whole wide range of things. So right now, there's a whole lot on my plate. But like I say, I think we're going to start with the big pushes that are going forward already in terms of housing and the recriminalization of drugs, and then start working on the transportation issues as we head into this session.
I read the report on the competitive analysis of Oregon, and I noticed that its ranking as far as the other 50 states and the District of Columbia went down a couple of steps. Any idea as to how that might turn around with regards to how you see Oregon in the next 4 years, or issues to have that competitive analysis competitive situation turn around?
Yeah, we're about to work on an update to those methodologies, but I think that we probably will see some improvement if we do see this continued growth. What we've seen in Oregon in this last cycle that we're not used to is really tremendous amount of productivity growth. And we've seen a tremendous amount of startup activity. We've seen a tremendous amount of investment, like I already mentioned, in terms of CHIPS Act. We've seen a tremendous amount of infrastructure investment at the federal and the state level and the like. And so the hope is that those productivity and associated income gains are going to continue going forward. Oregon has traditionally been really pushed by population growth and labor force growth and the like, but now it looks like we're starting to really maybe transition into a more capital intensive economy, and that would be great. The more capital investment and the more investment in human capital and educational attainment, the more growth we see going forward. Some of the erosion that we've seen in recent years that you mentioned in terms of the competitiveness, some has to do with crime and the addiction. And the increase relative to other states there. And some of it has to do with the fact that we implemented a large corporate activity tax, which is a gross receipts tax. And so that increased the tax burden here relative to past years. Well,
all I can say is that with your kind of analysis that's available to look at the public policy issues, my opinion is Oregonians are going to be very, very lucky to have good, hard-hitting, factual analysis that they can take a look at and make decisions that will hopefully make the state grow and prosper even more than it has in the past. So Mark, we at CSI are incredibly fortunate to have you and your skills, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me, and I'm really happy to be part of the team and excited to really get going on some of this research.
We're looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Earl.
Thank you for listening to the Common Sense Digest. For more on today's topic, as well as our research on the most pressing public policy issues facing Oregon, please visit commonsenseinstituteor.org. The preceding episode, along with all others, is available on podcatchers everywhere, or on our website under the podcast tab. Our technical producer is John Ekstrom and Deft Communications. This has been a production of the Common Sense Institute.